Hey you guys, and welcome back to my channel. In today's lesson, we're going to continue with our theme for word problems, this time focusing on line plots. But what is a line plot? A line plot is a graph that displays information that shows data as points or markers. So these little X's are markers, and in this line plot, each X represents one student. And each student, it shows that in this line plot is the hours that they spent reading. We're going to be making our own line plot today. So on the right-hand side, we have a chart. And we're going to be using this chart in order to determine the number of football players that have the same height and to just be able to compare our heights of our football players. In order to do that, you guys, we're going to have to figure out the smallest mixed number and the largest mixed number, because just like a number line, our line plot needs to have two endpoints, and our endpoints have to be whole numbers. So go ahead and pause the video. I want you to see if you can locate and identify the smallest mixed number and the largest mixed number from our chart. You should have gotten 5 6/8 and 6 5/8. This is the smallest and this is the largest. Now that I've identified the smallest and the largest, I know that my line plot needs to go from 5 to 7. Because 6 5/8 is less than 7, but I need to end at 7 in order to have enough because it's more than 6. And I can also fill in 6 on my number line. You guys, I know that I can also fill in halfway points or my half point. 5 to 6, my half point will be 5.5, or my midpoint. And then 6 to 7, my midpoint would be 6.5. Now that I've filled in the bare minimum of my line plot, it's time for me to begin plotting. I'm going to start with player A. Player A is 6 1/4 feet tall. I want to figure out where I need to place player A on my line plot. In order to do that, let's go ahead and look at 1/4. Because I know that player A is 6 1/4 feet tall. So I know that player A is going to be between 6 and 7, but I don't know exactly where. What I do know is I can decompose my tape diagram or my area model into fourths, and I will be shading in 1. Is 1/4 less than a half or more than a half? That's right, it's less than a half. So I know that my marker, which is going to represent one football player, is going to be less than a half. So it's going to be between 6 and 6.5. Let's go ahead and plot 6 1/4 on our line plot, and let's use our marker to mark off 6 1/4. Don't forget to check off your players just to make sure that you don't do the same player twice. Are there any other scholars that are 6 1/4 feet tall? That's right, player D is 6 1/4 feet tall as well. So that's yet another player that is 6 1/4 feet tall that I'm going to write in my line plot. Now let's move on to player B. Player B is 5 7/8 feet tall. So that means that player B is between 5 feet and 6 feet tall. In order for me to determine where player B would be on my line plot, I need to figure out where 7/8 would fall on my number line. So let's go ahead and represent 7/8. And we're shading in 7 parts. Is 7/8 less than a half or more than a half? That's right, it's way more than a half. It's so super close to 1 whole. So that means that 5 7/8 would be so super close to 6. So there's 5 7/8. And player B is 5 7/8. Go ahead and check it off. Are there any other players that are 5 7/8 feet tall? That's right, player F is the same height. Now let's focus on player C. Player C is 6.5 feet tall. Easy peasy. We already know where player C would be because we already know and we already plotted 6.5. What about player E? 6 2/8 feet tall. Let's go ahead and draw our tape diagram and decompose it into eighths, or our area model. And we're shading in 2/8 to represent 6 2/8. Is 2/8 less than a half or more than a half? That's right, 2/8 is less than a half. So that means that player E would be between 6 and 6.5. But it's less than 6.5, so where would it be? Let's think for a second. Let's look back at 1/4. If I decompose 1/4 one time, what's my new fraction? That's right, 2/8. So 1/4 is equivalent to 2/8. So player E is 6 1/4 feet tall. Now let's move on to player G. Player G is 6 1/8 feet tall. So that means that player G one-eighth is represented by this. 1/8, is it less than a whole? Or excuse me, less than a half or more than a half? Yeah, it's way less than a half. So that means that player G would be super close to 6 wholes. 6 1/8. And we can go ahead and put our marker in for player G. Are there any other players that are 6 1/8 feet tall? That's right, player J is also the same height. Look at us filling in our line plot. We're doing amazing, you guys. Now we're left with 2 football players, player H and player I. Player H is 6 5/8 feet tall. 6 5/8 feet. So that means that player H can be represented by this area model right here, 5/8. Is 5/8 less than a whole? Excuse me, less than a half or more than a half? That's right, it's more than a half. So that means that player H is going to be after 1/2. Let's go ahead and plot 6 5/8. And we're going to represent 1 marker for player H. Now we're down to 1 more. Player I is 5 6/8 feet tall. So player I is going to be between 5 and 6. Let's figure out where player I would be using our area model. Let's fill in 6/8. 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8. Is 6/8 less than a half or more than a half? That's right, it's more than a half. And look how close 6/8 is to a whole. So we're going to put 6/8 or 5 6/8 closer to 6 wholes. We're actually going to put it right next to 5 7/8. And go ahead and write in our marker for player I. You guys, we just filled in our own line plot based on the data in our table. Let's use this line plot in order to answer the next question. Let's find the difference in height of the tallest and shortest players. I'm looking for the difference. What operation do I need to perform? That's right, I need to subtract. Go ahead and put a subtraction symbol. So I'm subtracting the tallest player or the shortest player from the tallest player. Let's use our line plot in order to plug in this equation. Here's my shortest player, and here's my tallest player. So my tallest player is 6 5/8 feet tall. And my shortest player is 5 6/8 feet tall. And I need to find the difference. If I combine like terms, I would have 6 minus 5, which would give me 1. But 5/8 minus 6/8, I cannot do it, you guys. So let's think about this as those candy bars. My favorite, those candy bars. 6 5/8. Again, 6 minus 5 would give me 1. So now I would have 1 5/8 minus 6/8. Let's go ahead and represent this equation using our candy bars. Remember, one whole candy bar equals one whole. And each small piece represents 1/8 because my denominator is in eighths. And I have 5 small pieces because I have 5/8. And I'm taking away 6 of those small pieces. We already know I don't have enough, you guys. So what do I need to do? That's right, I need to decompose my whole. Now think about what your denominator is. How many parts, equal parts, am I going to decompose my whole into? That's right, 8 parts. I no longer have one whole. Goodbye, one whole. Instead, I have 8 eighths. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. How many eighths do I now have? That's right, I have 13 eighths, and I'm taking away 6 eighths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How many eighths are left? That's right, 7 eighths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Or 7 eighths. The difference in height of the tallest and shortest players is 7 eighths feet. Thanks you guys so much for watching this video. I really hope it was helpful in understanding how to draw your own line plots and use that data to solve word problems. I'll see you in the next video.